We're getting there. No, we're not going to do that. There's a packet here too if you need it. Yeah. What the heck?
You guys ready? Commissioners? You guys ready? You ready? Okay.
Good evening. The City of Bothell Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, February the 3rd will come to order. Let the record show that all commissioners are present and accounted for, except for Commissioner Cecil. I have not, has anyone heard from Commissioner Cecil? So at this point, it's an unexcused absence. You know, let's hope that he shows up, but, because I'm not aware of him not planning to be here. We have minutes to approve for this afternoon's or this evening's meeting, minutes of December 16th and January 20th. Is there any discussion with regards to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes for January 20th, 2016 and December 16th, 2015.
Second.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We do not have any new business. We are going to discuss, Bruce, our calendar for next week, but are we going to do it at the end of the meeting?
Yes, actually, I'll do that. My plan was to do that during reports from staff, but
Okay.
if you'd like it
Yeah,
another
no,
time, that's good
No,
too.
reports from staff would be great.
Good enough, thank you.
So at this point in our agenda, we will move with a continuation of the public hearing of the 2015 docket of plan and code amendments regarding the Shelton View Meridian third southeast sub-area. And before we do that, before we open it up to the public, is there any presentation from staff?
I actually do have a presentation I'd kind of like to go through. I'll go through it relatively quickly, but I think there's a couple points that I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission, and members of the public. This is, of course, the 2015 deferred items, including the Shelton View, or sometimes called Nike Hill, Plan and Code Amendments. And I just wanted to show up just to identify to you folks that we actually,
Just
I'm sorry.
before you go
Yes.
any further, what you're seeing on that
It's not
screen,
showing up there?
we are not seeing on our
Uh-oh.
screens.
Are the
Maybe
screens-
they're all off.
Are the screens on?
Hey, we have to turn them on.
That's very true.
There we go.
Amazing how that works.
That complex technology. Turn it on.
And also let the record show we have been graced with the presence of Commissioner Cecil. And so it's no longer an unexcused absence.
So are we all up and running?
Yes,
Okay.
we're good.
Okay. Just want to let you know, of course, this is the existing zoning that's currently in place in the area. And this is kind of a capacity table that kind of identifies the number of dwelling units that could conceivably be occurring out there. Again, the number that's most important is the one down here, the total, because that's what you compare against. This is the draft Planning Commission recommendation based upon the last couple of public hearings where we've identified potential locations for different zoning classifications. And of course, the primary focus has been the area that along Meridian Avenue and around the intersection of 228th and Meridian Avenue. And this is my record of how the commission was generally going at the last hearing. We do have a couple areas where we may have some more discussion, and that includes this little area, this kind of southeast corner, if you would, just south of 231st Street Southeast. There was some discussion from a couple of commission members of maybe there was a potential to retain that as an R9600 designation, and I've kind of marked that as well. Some other discussion was about a potential of maybe doing something along the front portion of the FEMA/Army Reserve site. I'll let you know that I had another quick little email exchange with my point of contact individual at the Armory, and he's still reiterating we are not going to abandon this site. But be that as it may, I did not put that on there because I didn't really have a full consensus from the commission on that, but you know, we can always make that change. This is kind of a detail area of the intersection that basically kind of shows the designations that are being currently considered. R4000 in the northeast quadrant, R5400D, which has got, you know, basically 6 existing detached single-family residential neighborhoods and a pond, as well as, of course, across the street, the upper portion would be, again, designated RACOPNB, which is a mixed-use type designation. And south of there, we'd go with the R4000 on the west side of Meridian Avenue and R5400A on the east side of Meridian Avenue. And that was another thing that we had a little bit of discussion about, but I think we'll have some more discussion tonight. This, of course, is a detail of the area along Meridian Avenue, and this basically shows a couple things. One is the area that may be of a potential to keep as an R9600. That was one of the features that was discussed. And, of course, the R4000. One of the things you'll notice, and, of course, these are all illustrations within your packet, is that we've identified what the capacity number is for each of those areas, 53 units, 48 units, and things like that. That's the capacity, not necessarily what the lot or dwelling unit yield will be. Capacity usually gets a little higher number than what the real life does, but that gives you an idea of what the upper limit would probably be. We also have included a capacity table for the Planning Commission's recommendation. And again, the important number is down here where you can see what the potential increase in dwelling units would be. And in this case, it's primarily dwelling units, would be underneath the Planning Commission regulation. We're about 108 to 230 additional dwelling units over the existing capacity. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of footnotes to that because of various revisions. I'm not going to go through those because they're kind of boring. One of the other areas that we kind of had some discussion about was the potential for having a certain performance standard. And what that performance standard would do is it'd say, look, this is a mixed-use zone. We want to see a mixed-use zone here. Therefore, a portion of this site of what happens out here will have a retail or office type commercial kind of a use, as well as we want to have a certain amount of residential use as well. Again, this is supposed to be a mixed-use kind of a designation where we have both residential and retail. And the retail, of course, would supply services to the local residents, as well as we want to have some residential component. We had a long conversation with ARCH, or Regional Coalition for Housing, Arthur Sullivan, and he actually threw in this idea of perhaps having a minimum residential designation as well. So I wanted to throw that out to the commission there. And basically the idea of, okay, 50% of the floor area with this building would be residential, and that'd be a minimum. And a minimum of, let's say, 25% of the frontage along the major roadway, Meridian or 228th, would be basically retail. And I just put it in the corner because that's always a really fun place to see retail. But the idea behind it, it could be almost anywhere along this retail frontage. And that's kind of where you want your retail to be, out there in the front, so that, well, it's so people can see it. And the other, of course, is we're trying, again, to promote a little bit more pedestrian activity within these areas. And again, the whole idea behind this is to match what some of the successful developments, both downtown, basically Six Oaks is a good example, and as well as Beardsley Village, that's basically the one just across the campus. Those both had a minimum retail component associated with it. One of the other things that we talked about, this affordable housing concept is getting a little bit more fleshed out. Now, we don't have anything directly for you tonight yet. It's just because it's pretty complex. And what we're proposing is that we'll bring you that really complex or detailed language at the March 2nd continued public hearing when we kind of bring this all back to you. But some of the things that we're talking about is on a staff level is having a minimum of about 10% of the dwelling units be affordable. And, you know, for example, a 50-unit development would have 5 affordable units. If you have 9 or fewer, that's when you'd go to like the fee in lieu kind of a concept. And then there'd be some performance standards on that as well. Affordable units would have a certain floor area minimum, like 500 square feet, or some kind of a mixture. Okay, some of them would be studio, some would be 1 bedroom, some would be 2 bedrooms, and there's a couple different provisions about that. Oh, excuse me. Finally, one of the things that Arch is really kind of wanting to explore a little bit, with your permission, of course, is the idea behind, we're talking about clustering, and we're going to go a little bit more into that in the detail. They foresee a potential for clustering as a means of maybe incentivizing affordable housing by doing cottages or duplexes or something like that. I know the commission was a little bit worried about putting some type of a different use, you know, that basically is maybe not quite compatible with the neighborhood into there. But they would like to have a little bit more discussion with you about maybe there's some other options to get there that basically wouldn't be quite so dramatic as having a duplex in a single family residential neighborhood. So that's something that they kind of would like to have some discussion with the commission on as well. And of course, as I identified, we're going to provide you some pretty detailed information on March the 2nd for we can have some really, really good discussion about that. Now, we kind of talked a little bit about the study session. I'm going to go a little bit more into this in the staff reports, but I just want to remind everybody that we have that at 6 p.m. Tuesday in this room, or maybe that room. We're still working a little bit on the location. And that's basically the discussion, this clustering concept or this mechanism, and to seek council concurrence to initiate a code amendment. And basically what happens is in our process is that the city council has to initiate a code amendment before we can actually start working on it in theory. And so that's basically one of the things that we'll be doing on the Tuesday, February the 9th, where we'll have that. And again, I wanted to check with the commission to see if it'd be okay if in our presentation to the council, we say, hey, look, maybe there may be an affordable housing component here that we may be able to look, and we don't want to exclude any of the possibilities from this initiation process. And again, the idea behind tonight's hearing is to continue it to March the 2nd, where you're going to get, and afterwards you're going to get some pretty detailed, really big, thick packet. We're going to go back to the old thick packets again, sorry about that. And then our proposal is that should the council decide to initiate a clustering mechanism, we'd like to kind of get that discussion started fairly early here. And maybe on March 23rd or April 6th, I know that doesn't seem too early, but we'd like to kind of jump on that pretty quickly. And we can just have a discussion and provide some background information. I know Commissioner Clark said, look, I'd like to have a whole bunch of information. And once we do that initiation, that's when we're going to really get into that detailed analysis. Okay, what are other jurisdictions doing? What are some of our options here? And we'd like to hold that in late March or maybe even early April, as soon as we can, to get that kind of process kicked off. So I'm going to stop there and open it up to any questions, or maybe if you want to go to the public comments. Thank you.
Just a couple of comments from me, and then there may be some questions on your presentation. I really think you've done an outstanding job of kind of moving the ball forward. Every meeting, we're getting more refined as we move along in terms of what we really want to emphasize. Speaking just for me, but the affordable housing component, I think, is a key objective of what we're trying to do up here, along with all the others around open space and retail development and transportation improvements, et cetera. So anyway, I just would say great job. We're not there yet in terms of having, we'll never fully arrive, but I think we do want to have this clustering discussion that could turn into a clustering tool that could be used here and also elsewhere in the city. So those are kind of my opening comments. Are there any questions or comments specifically? Commissioner Clark?
I would just agree with Chair Booth on that. Thank you very much for your hard work.
You're welcome.
Seeing no other questions, I did have a few specific questions. Could we go to figure 5? So I'd like to share my thoughts and also just kind of get the thoughts of everybody else up here.
Is this your figure 5?
Yes,
Okay.
that you're on the right one. Why are we not looking at a consistency on both sides of Meridian here? We have R 5400A, 4000, 5400D, and R9. What's the benefit of 4 different designations in such a close, a small area?
Yeah, that's a good question. And essentially, here's what's going on here. In this northern portion here, as soon as I get this, there it is. This area, this is all existing detached residential. It's not likely to change for a long, long time. And as I recall, a discussion on the east side of Meridian was that, you know, this is getting into some single-family residential neighborhoods immediately adjacent to you, to this location, basically just immediately to the east, and it's an R9600 designation. It was viewed that the 5400A would be more of an appropriate transition kind of a zone.
Right.
We had one scenario that had an R4000 on both sides of Meridian, but I believe the discussion was that, you know, it just doesn't seem like 4000 should be right next to R9600. Let's have a little more transition. Now, on the west side of Meridian Avenue, it makes a lot of sense to have an R4000 designation and not an R5400A designation because this is a really shallow site. And R5400A has a tendency to be more like a detached condo product or some type of a really, really nice townhome type of a concept. And an R4000 could have a little bit, has a little more flexibility in how you do that because it's not going to be one of those really easy sites to develop. So that's basically why you see these little differences, just to kind of reflect what we have on the ground there. And of course, naturally to the west, of course, is the Army Reserve FEMA site, which is unlikely to change anytime soon. At least that's our understanding. And it makes a little bit more sense to have an R4000. It's only more traditional, a more true multifamily residential designation against that area. So that's kind of how we got to where we are.
So if I were to reword it, it's there, even though it may look kind of random, if you will, in fact, it's really not. That coming from the FEMA property, we're kind of, we're getting more dense as we get closer to the FEMA property, and there is a kind of a logic to each one of the designations that we're putting in there.
Yeah, and it's kind of on a micro scale. It's, you know, kind of like city plan on a micro scale, and it kind of makes some sense.
Yeah, okay. Any questions on that? Could we go to figure 3? Thank you. So I was the one who initiated this idea of a small strip of the FEMA property that right now is R9600. And I know that there's some discussion, we had some discussion around some of that being athletic fields and again, we're talking about aspirational future for that property, understanding that the Army has no intent of selling anytime soon. But I guess I'd like to hear from anybody else up on the dais if they would be either opposed or in support of the idea of along 228th there, the FEMA property having some type of commercial or residential activity center designation. Commissioner Cecil.
It seems to me that, you know, it's right across the street from the proposed, I guess it's just touching corners, but it seems like more of a commercial designation would make sense, and that's kind of that intersection is kind of our centroid, and we're trying to make that an activity center, so that would be my input there.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I agree. I think it's a good idea. I thought we were still looking at the possibility of that being like an OP designation with the idea that might be a little easier to get play fields on too. So was that taken off the table? I wasn't here.
Yeah, I wasn't either. I kind of thought that was where we were headed as well.
You know, when I was looking at my notes real carefully, and I was trying to FEMA site, I was writing all these numbers down, and I thought the idea was that generally what I heard was that, look, you know what, we'll have lots of notice when Army decides to sell this thing. We'll jump on that bandwagon when that happens, and then we can kind of customize what type of zoning we want, as well as the type of uses. R9600 allows playfields. it's a conditional use. So, you know, either way you go there, even if the city never changed the designation, R 9600 would support a park or a playfield or a facility of that type.
Okay. Well, just count me down as one who would like to see us, I don't want us to burn a lot of cycles on this. I understand that it's far off in the future, but I see value in terms of us designating what we would, from a long-term standpoint for the city of Bothell, like this land to look like. And I may be the only one up here that feels that way. Just count me down for that one. Yeah, Commissioner Clark.
I have a question about what you just said, Bruce. I think you're right. It is allowed as a conditional use, but I can't see playfields being a component of an R 9600 development. But I would more see it possible in some sort of OP, because I thought there was some discussion about that there's something in the code, or maybe there was something in the code that allowed some sort of flexibility to commercial developers if they're doing that.
There are some provisions like that, but one of the things about it is that if you're going to do something like what happened in the North Creek Business Park, where we had ball fields provided and special features like that, those are more mega projects that have some really tight plan unit development provisions that are associated with that. I don't think we could be able to achieve that same level here, partly because we don't have the bonus point system that we used to have many years ago, and the reason we don't have that is because it was deemed to be pretty subjective. And the other is that OP, I think you'd have a tendency to have a really big office building there or something like that, and I don't know if that's really what we want to do there yet. And I don't know. It's kind of like, it's almost if we keep it at R 9600, it's kind of a reserve area until we get to that point where somebody says, hey, we want to do something here. The only other thing that I would caution a little bit about is that one of the things we're trying to do here with this activity center I'm sorry, I better use this, around this intersection is to kind of have this kind of, you know, neighborhood activity center, not a regional activity center. If we start spreading it out into this FEMA site, which is a big piece of property, it's over 40 acres, we may lose some of that intimacy, I guess is what I would call it, of just having this really small area of activity center. Just a little bit worried about spreading it out too much, but you know, as we all know, it's only going to happen if the Army says it's going to happen, and if they do, we'll let the Planning Commission that time tackle that.
And one last thing, Bruce, we're going to discuss this further after this meeting, is that
Oh,
correct?
yes, absolutely. In
Okay.
fact, the purpose of March the 2nd would be to bring back both the plan language, because we've already got some, you know, some preliminary plan language, as well as implementing regulations.
Do we need to work on a direction in terms of that section of the R5400A that is it optional at retaining it at 9600, or is that something we can do at a later date?
And that would be,
On the right side, or the east side of Meridian?
oh, down here? The idea would be that if we could have kind of a direction as to which way the commission would like to go tonight, that would be wonderful. But again, it's one of those things where, you know, we can just keep it as one of those placeholder discussion items as you kind of, you know, think about the idea as well. We do have probably 2 more public hearings on this.
Thanks, Bruce.
Commissioner Cabe?
Just general thoughts on this current sheet we're looking at. I don't really have any opposition in switching to a commercial designation along Meridian, but I'd rather just leave it R9600 for now, not make any changes to the FEMA site, because it'll be master planned or it'll be developed at some point, and I think they'll look at that entire area. Reserving a space along Meridian, I don't know if it buys us anything at this particular moment.
And you're referring to 228th Street.
Yeah, the north
Okay.
side of the FEMA
Okay.
property. I realize that 5400D is the current designation, but I'd be in favor of changing that to be whatever's consistent to the south along Meridian, so that small section, yes, up in the corner, I'd want to keep that contiguous with whatever we do to the south, regardless of the
Oh,
current
okay, so
designation.
you would rather not have a change from the detached to attached, you'd rather just keep it all detached?
Yeah.
Okay,
Understanding it's probably not going to change, but at least it's all uniform moving forward. I can't remember where we left off. I thought when we talked last time, we decided to leave RAC, OP, and B just on the north side of Meridian, or did we always have it coming down to the south side?
Oh,
Okay. I don't know exactly how that would develop, but 1.1 acres, that small corner lot, is that, I guess, large enough to achieve what we're hoping to as far as bringing some retail in? To me, it seems like it either needs to be R4000 continuous south of Meridian, or potentially that RAC, OP, and B needs to be extended a little further south just to make something developable.
yeah, and that was a discussion we had in-house, is because, you know, a little over an acre is kind of a tough site to have with an RAC designation. But I was following kind of the dictates of the commission, which said, you know, let's kind of go with option B. Option A, if you recall, did go down and made it 2 acres down there. And that would be a, you know, from a development standpoint, that would be make a much more logical area for RAC, OP, and B, because then you could really create yourself a pretty good sized development, you know, with the housing and the retail below and things like that. So I'm saying that would be kind of up to the commission as to how far south they'd like to go. But you're absolutely right. 2 acres would be a more logical type of a development.
Okay, and I'm not, like, similar to what Commissioner Booth said, I'm not suggesting we kick this around 10 more times. I'm just sharing my thoughts. And then as far as the R5400A on the east side of Meridian, I think that's already an extreme, not an extreme, but it's already a large change for the area, going from single-family home to attached, so I wouldn't be in favor of going anything more aggressive than that. I really think 5400D is a more fitting designation for that area, but I understand we have some non-conforming uses that would be resolved by making this change, so. And then the option to retain R9600, yeah, I think we should leave that at R9600 because it's a clear dividing line on that street.
Yeah, and as you point out, streets are very classic zoning boundary areas.
Thanks.
Commissioner Stedman?
I don't see any reason to make any change to the FEMA designation, FEMA site designation right now. As was just stated, you know, we don't know if it's going to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And that whole area will develop its own personality over the next decade, 2 decades. At that point in time, I think if that site does become available, the planning commission at that time will have a better idea as to what's best to be, you know, for that site. So my suggestion is we just leave that at R9600 as a placeholder. I think the comments about the sites that are designated RAC, OP, NB, and the size of them, I think that's a very wise comment. If those sites are too small, you're not going to get the development that you want. So I think we make a determination that either we leave the R4000 all the way up to 228th and just leave that northwest corner of 228th and Meridian as RAC, OP, and B, or we carry that line down a little further, as we had discussed, I think, last week before. Regarding the east side of Meridian, I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other whether it's R5400D or R5400A. I like the R4000 on the west side of Meridian. I do think that makes a good transition from the FEMA site to the rest of the neighborhood.
Commissioner Vliet?
Thank you, and thanks again, Bruce, for putting this together. We made a lot of changes to it along the way. I appreciate it. I think it's looking really good. I also agree with the R9600 leaving the FEMA site as is. I think that's appropriate long-term as we look at PROSAP possibilities down the road or wherever it's going to be. We don't know what it's going to be, but I also appreciate the chair's comments about possible commercial activity there eventually. But I think it will develop into its own kind of neighborhood feel, as Commissioner Stedman said. Thanks for putting the option to retain that corner as 9600 south of 231st Street Southeast. I think that's appropriate. Yeah, and I think I would also agree maybe with Blake's little comments that maybe that R4000, if there's a way to maybe extend down more of an activity, different type of zoning designation there to make it a little bit bigger area to be able to create what that neighborhood wants to create. I don't have a whole lot of background in that, in those specifics, but that does seem reasonable to me, so that's all.
Commissioner Cecil.
Yes, thanks, Bruce. I guess just adding on to the comments about the southwest corner of the intersection, so the potentially extending that RAC OPNB zone down. And I'm particularly, I guess, looking at your diagram here on page 2 with these potential minimum requirements for half residential and some retail, and so you're breaking that development up already, and if you make it too small, then you're not going to get, you're not even going to be able to get anything in there. So maybe a espresso stand or something, I guess. But so I'd be in favor of moving that line to the south as well. The 25% frontage requirement, and I know this hasn't been fleshed out, but is that a percentage of the lineal footage of the frontage, or is that an area percentage?
You know, we
it-
went back and forth as a staff on that, as it should be a area, and we decided frontage was the more appropriate way to go. Just
Okay.
from the standpoint that, again, we're trying to have that type of a use toward our streets as kind of an attractive kind of an item. But there's nothing that says you say, and this has been done with Beardsley Village, you say, okay, you establish an area and then you let the market kind of control where it goes, and it naturally goes out to the front. That's one of those tough ones. I mean, you could go frankly either way and it'd probably work just fine.
Yeah. I like the idea of maybe some residential on the first floor, but I think with the size of these, I think 50% seems pretty high to me. And maybe residential could be pushed maybe up to the second floor or whatever. It seems a little bit rigid. Maybe we just go with a lower like a 25% or,
Tell you what, how about if we make it clear that the residential could be second floor and higher? I mean, we're only talking 3 stories in this area anyway.
right. But if you're trying to encourage retail and you got this little building and you got to have half of it as residential, it doesn't necessarily leave you a whole bunch, by the time you get all your access in there and those kinds of things, a whole bunch for your retail.
Okay.
So in this
Yeah,
scenario,
well,
you're mostly residential potentially, I guess, on the first floor. And
you're right, yes.
I guess my vision for it as a hub or as an activity center would be more, at least ground level, more retail. And then your residential or office or whatever could go above. So that's just a general comment about that.
Let me think about that.
So I'd be in favor
That's a
though of
good
moving
idea.
that boundary line south for on the corner there. So I had a couple more. Yeah, I think that's my main comment right now. So is Arthur going to be attending then the study session? Or have we yet to determine that, to talk about the affordable housing part of the clustering?
No, he won't be there next week. We're just gonna identify this as a commission is thinking maybe this might be one of the elements we'd want to include with this clustering investigation.
Okay.
And let it kind of go at that.
Yeah.
We might be there quite a while with
Yeah,
Arthur.
right. Commissioner Vliet.
Yeah, one more comment on the R4000, which is currently the DNR property, the sliver there. If we're trying to make a designation for part of that ownership, I am interested to hear how we do that. I mean, let's say we want to make it 2 acres. Like, it just seems interesting how we go about doing that as a designation. Usually, we try to contain a property for a landowner as being one zone. I know we've actually made some zoning changes to make it continuous. So at the same time, I do think it'd be nicer if there was more of the RAC component south. So.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, one of the things is that we try not to do that, but there are very specific areas in the city where we have purposely split the zoning, even if it is a single property. And there's kind of an area thing, there's kind of a dimensional thing that applies there. And I don't think we would have no qualms about doing that in this location as either.
Commissioner Cave.
Sorry, one other quick question. I don't want to go back on my earlier recommendation to move that border south, but I think the one issue that residents raised before was being across the street from businesses. So one thing we need to keep in consideration as we move forward. But I couldn't agree more with Commissioner Cecil's statements that being an NB designation now, I think we have the potential to lose retail if we had a 50% residential component on the first floor versus, maybe it's second floor and up, like you mentioned, Bruce, or something a little bit more retail friendly or stringent.
Actually, I think what I can hear, and I think I concur completely, is to take the retail, only make the retail the first floor. The residential could be automated in the second and third floor. So I think that's a really good clarification we want to make. Because you're absolutely right. We don't want to have that competing interest. Let's say your retail wants to be a certain size. Oh, sorry, you got to have 50% of the ground floor being resident. That would be defeating our purpose. So I think we should leave the ground floor just the retail and then residential above. So, okay, good point.
Okay. We'll have more for you, but this might be a good break point for us to go ahead and open it up to those that are here. This is a public hearing, and so we welcome your feedback and comments. If you could keep your comments to this particular topic, we would appreciate it. And when you come forward, give us your name and address, and if you'd limit your comments to around 3 minutes, we would appreciate it. No pressure, but this is your opportunity. Yes, sir.
Are you speaking just to those properties along Meridian, north and south?
Primarily, but I'll tell you, I think I have an idea of what, you're welcome to come forward. And we are looking at kind of the entire sub area. So as long as your comments are with regards to this particular sub area, we'd love to hear from you.
My name is Bob Rorabaugh. I live in Snohomish County, North Bothell, 22724 Second Place West. I'll ask right up front, may I address the audience viewing us by the city's television station and the people in the room?
Sorry, it's actually appropriate to address the commission, but the audience will hear you.
I can address the commission.
There you go.
Maybe they've got deep pockets. There is a cost to park and open space acquisition. And those of us who are One Bothell, Friends of North Creek Forest, West Woods, Shelton View Forest, are bearing some costs just to bring up our citizens up to speed on what's left for parks and open spaces, the process that you have respectively invited us into. So long before we vote on a parks board, I would say to you as citizens and to a listening audience or a viewing audience that your favorite project or parcel needs some funds to work with. So I'm asking for citizens, you among them, to contribute dollars toward any of 4 projects, be it SheltonViewForest.org, Friends of North Creek Forest.org, OneBothell.org, or West Woods, whose email address or whose website I do not know. I'm asking you to become with us vested advocates. I speak for the Shelton View Forest Association to say that if we had $400 given in the near future, we would be willing to provide application funds for a nonprofit, citizen-driven Parks Foundation that serves all of 42,000 citizens of Bothell. Thank you. We will get out the vote should this come to a parks bond in November. And my associate can tell you how many people we have on our website as of lately. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Rorabaugh. Appreciate it. And I know that this will be in front of the city council if it hasn't already. And so we will be looking at different ways, both through public funding as well as private funding, that folks can contribute to this. Thanks a lot.
Mr. Chairman, and to members of the commission, and Blake representing the city, thank you very much.
Awesome. Good evening, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to see you all again. I hope
Could you give us,
everybody's been
sorry
well.
to interrupt, just your name and
Yeah,
address?
Mark Ruchirut.
What was that, Mark?
Ruchirut. Ruchhirat. Since we last spoke, we now have over 1,000 signatures petitioning to save Shelton View Forest on change.org. We've also lobbied last week in Olympia to make certain that our wish to keep the parks and wildlife areas in Bothell is heard. In addition to our petition, gentlemen, there's also been a lot of talking around town. Everyone has questions and nobody seems to have any answers, so I just figured I'd ask you all here today. Now, I'm just a layman, but I'm willing to ask questions that many people in town are afraid to ask. I apologize for how forthright this will sound, but because of the impeachment controversy surrounding our last mayor, Joshua Freed, and his role in real estate development in Bothell, we do find it, rather interesting that there are some of the members of the Bothell's Planning Commission are also developers. So Bob was trying to fill me in on what I missed, since I just learned about this recently. So we're just trying to find out that in what way could your professional lives as developers and your civil servant duties as members of Bothell's Planning Commission become a potential conflict? If you can fill me in on that, that'd be awesome.
Well, I'll respond first, and perhaps there's other comments, but each one of us has a career either in engineering, development, investment, brokerage. It's good to have some type of experience with regards to the use of land. Certainly not required to be on the Planning Commission. As far as a conflict of interest, there's certainly a legal definition for a conflict of interest, and each of us, if there's been any question with regards to that, I've discussed that with the city attorney. And I can assure you that there's no legal conflict of interest for any of us participating in this. So speaking personally, I'm here to do the responsibility and the duty that I've been asked to do from the city council, and not in any way have my own personal agenda be influenced here at all. And so just because one is a developer, or I don't see where there's a particular conflict.
Well, just again, regarding the last mayor, when you start to see signs that says they impeach, the mayor, it kind of raises questions. And then when you find out there's a connection between the development and things like that, just want to kind of cover our bases. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything or anything at all. Just raising the question because other people around town who I've met with since, finding out about the Shelton View Forest potentially being rezoned and whatnot, other entities, I'm totally new at this, right? So I just felt that, might as well just ask the people who are involved and just kind of see what happens. And,
Well, I think that if there is some type of personal or professional financial gain to be made by any of the parcels involved here,
right.
then any of us has the responsibility to claim and make that statement and excuse themselves from participating further. But each of us has made that determination that we don't have any type of financial dog in the hunt here with regards to this sub area at all.
Okay, awesome.
We do have, one of our members lives in the sub area. Would that excuse him from being participating in this? I don't think so.
Right. Thanks. I just wanted to address it. Like I said, I missed it. I missed this conversation, I guess, months ago with Bob, just kind of filling me in on this. But since he got brought up here to ask.
Yeah, no, appreciate you bringing it up. Anybody else? Commissioner Clark?
I've made no secret about my involvement in land development. I do land development consulting work in Bothell and virtually every other jurisdiction in Western Washington, it seems like. But I've always seen that of myself and the other members that have experience in that sort of activity to be uniquely qualified to be on the Planning Commission. I think the risk of a conflict of interest pales in comparison to the value that can be added by having people that really understand the underlying code, have worked with the code, and have the experience to help provide guidance and that sort of thing. That's what we do. We provide guidance to the council and make recommendations to the council. But I think that's a positive as opposed to a negative, and I think anything can become a conflict of interest. We all need to be aware of that and be very careful about how we do things. I've recused myself from one of the other issues, one of the other comprehensive plan amendments, because I saw a conflict of interest, and I think we would all do the same thing or consider doing the same thing, given that circumstance. I would also caution you and anybody else that's kind of making up their mind about the commission or the council based on what they've heard about what happened with former Mayor Freed, to look at the facts. Really do your research. There's a lot of rumor out there. There's a lot of misinformation. I would encourage you, if you need to make a public information request, to look at the details of that transaction and what happened, that sort of thing. I would encourage you to do that, because there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of potential for misinformation. So I would encourage you to do that as well.
Sure. Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you for being here. And we will continue this public hearing into the future, so you'll have future opportunities to come and participate. So we've had Bruce, Mr. Blackburn, we've had a discussion around your presentation. We've talked about some of the specific parcels. We've provided you with some guidance on it. Is there anything more specific that you'd like to make sure we come away with before we move to the clustering memorandum that you've put together and kind of preparing for next week?
I just want to make sure I've kind of understanding what we're doing here. I believe what I've heard is that there's a desire to expand this RAC NPOP south, a dimension not really determined yet, to make it a little bit more logical, maybe an acre and a half or something like that, that's a little bit bigger. As well as, of course, to do R5400A here, R4000 there. Army Reserve FEMA, keep it at R9600 is kind of what I'm hearing here. And again, you know, the MC Coast property has long been discussed by the commission a long time ago to keep it at R9600, as well as the DNR property that's just west of the Sheltonview Elementary School to keep it at R9600, which is the existing plan and code designations. So I think that's it. The only thing that is still kind of out there is this little southeast segment. I'm still hearing a little bit kind of back and forth on that, and that's okay to keep it that way. And I think I like the idea behind that. I may identify to you what the different capacity number is. It's 7. You know, if you keep it at R5400A, it's 14 and a half, and if you keep it at 9600, it's about 7 and a half. So it's a difference of 7 units. Not a lot, but I think maybe some of the discussion about, you know, okay, where is it most kind of associated with as far as a neighborhood goes, maybe it is more appropriate for R9600, but that's a discussion we can have on a second. So with that, I think that you could easily close the public testimony portion of the hearing tonight, and then we'll go into our clustering discussion.
Okay. Any further discussion or guidance for Bruce on any of the points that he just brought up? Commissioner Clark.
I guess I would ask on that issue with the option, is that something we should try to decide on tonight to make?
I would like to. I mean, which option? Are you talking about the lowering of the
No,
this
I'm
here?
talking about, I think it seems like we're all on board with changing that 1.1 acres to something bigger. I'm talking about down at the south end of the R5400A. Yeah,
right there to retain that at 9600?
Yeah, I would like to have, I mean, I've heard a couple people weigh in on it tonight, and I think, I'm wondering if we should be trying to get that.
I
ironed out
think we
so that
should.
there's-
That
Yeah.
would be nice.
And so it would be good to give him some guidance on that. So let's just kind of, I don't know if we need to do a motion or just kind of where we're at. Let's just go ahead.
Is there?
Could we have some more discussion?
Yeah,
about it
sure,
before
of
we
course.
make a motion? Okay. So Bruce, I think I'd like to see it remain at R5400A. I'll just state that right up front. Couple questions though. There's between some zones and others, there are buffering requirements, there's setback requirements and that sort of thing. Is there a setback requirement or a buffering requirement for R5400A bordering against a single-family zone?
Yes, essentially in the R5400A, there is a higher buffering standard, the landscape buffer of 10 feet, as well as, of course, there is a building setback dimension of 25 feet. So essentially what would happen here is in the R5400A, this portion, if they decide to do duplexes, fourplexes, or something like that, they would have to be at least 25 feet from their zoning boundary line. So that basically would mean, let's see if I can do this better with this one. Yeah, that basically would mean from this line here, all the buildings with more than one dwelling unit within it, duplexes and triplexes and things, would be at least 25 feet from that boundary, as well as a 10-foot wide landscape treatment.
So that's what I thought. I guess so what that kind of means to me is that in a lot of ways, you have an opportunity to better separate or do a very good job of separating it with that buffer. And then again, it lends flexibility, I think, R5400A. And so I guess I don't really see the need to create a line there just because there's a street. It looks to me like there's some properties there that might actually be developed if they was changed to R5400A, which I think one of the reasons we're suggesting making these changes, because we're trying to encourage that. So I would weigh in that I'd prefer to keep it as your original proposal was. And I also would, well, I'll leave it at that. That's where I'm at.
Commissioner Cecil.
So Bruce, in that particular area, I think you said a 9600 gets you 7,
Yes,
a density of 7, and then a R5400A gets you
14-ish.
14, so about twice that. So I'm not familiar with that area. Are those all occupied with single-family residences currently?
They all have existing single-family residences located on them.
Okay, and it looks like there's 6 of them right now?
There are 6 I think actually, no, I think there's 5 separate parcels
5?
there. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
there's
essentially.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yes.
Yeah. So essentially, if it stays 9600, it is what it is, and you're not going to develop it, which, I think is fine. If you go to R5400, you're essentially going to be, somebody's going to have to make the determination that it's worth tearing all these houses down to get 14 instead of 6, I guess. So, I guess that's up to the market, but it seems like, to me, if you're losing 25 feet around the perimeter, in terms of being able to build. I don't know. I could go either way. I think it does make sense just to keep it how it is, because those houses are where they've been for, it looks like a while now.
Long time.
So I guess that's the way I'd lean, but I can be convinced, I guess, if I heard some good points on the other side.
Mr. Vliet.
Yeah, I think I'm actually the one who brought it up to kind of split that off or to retain it, I guess I should say. It's 9600. I'm still in favor of that. I think the street makes a clean delineation of it. I guess I heard a comment here. It is good to have development. I think there's a lot of people in Bothell right now that I speak to and I just run into at the store or wherever that happen to know I'm on the commission. And I do get a lot of people who are a little bit frustrated with houses being crammed together and having 5-foot setback, a fence and a little walkway and then houses. And so I think there's a lot of people in Bothell who want to retain a lot more of the character of the 9600. Not that there's very much appropriate upzoning going on right next door to that, but I think the street makes a clean delineation, and I'd like to keep it as it is right now.
Commissioner Stedman.
Well, I have to agree with Commissioner Vliet and Commissioner Cave on this, that I think the R9600 is fine as it is. I was actually looking further south and kind of southeast at a couple of very large parcels that are zoned R9600 and thinking, okay, what could be done with those? But then those actually back up to additional R9600 lots as well. So to me, I think the character for that whole area should remain at R9600.
Good.
One more?
Do we need to actually do a formal motion, or
No.
have we kind
I
of waited?
just want to make sure I have 4 commissioners identifying as 9600 there.
Yeah, Commissioner Cecil.
So if we were to decide to leave that area at 9600, would that just essentially change our boundary of our area here and exclude this part out of that? Is that?
No, I mean, we can continue to have as a study area, because the idea behind the study area is you try and make it bigger than what you're actually gonna change, because you wanna make sure and include people who may not be, might wanna become involved. And as we saw the first couple hearings, we had a lot of people involved, and now we're kind of paring it down, but that doesn't change that area. It just basically says, in our study and investigation of this area, we believe R 9600 is the more appropriate designation, or as is the most appropriate designation.
Commissioner Clark.
I just want to point out, you mentioned that one of the reasons for having the R5400A on the east side was and not going to R4000 is it kind of creates a bit of a transition between the R9600 and the R4000. If we eliminate this, if we keep this at 9600, you are going to have R4000 directly against R9600 across the street. So I just thought that might be worth pointing out.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why we thought maybe it made some sense to have it across the street. Although again, Meridian is an arterial, so it's going to be a pretty wide street. You're going to have 3 lanes plus bike lanes and all those other things. So there is some vertical separation, even though it's a roadway. So I think you probably would be able to see enough differentiation with that separation that I think it would make sense to, well, either way you want to go, it probably makes a lot of sense.
I see the arguments both ways. But I would say that I'm leaning towards keeping it at 9600.
Okay.
Are there any other parts to your presentation and any specifics? Did we give you pretty clear guidance that we would like to see on the west side of Meridian that RAC, OPNB designation extended a little bit further south?
Yes,
Okay.
I got that really well clear.
Okay, good.
I think we're in pretty good shape there.
Anything
And
else?
I just want to make sure I verify that as far as this kind of a concept goes, first floor requirement for retail is fine, but let's not put that on the first floor for residential, i.e. the residential would be satisfied by the second and third floors.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Bruce, does that preclude residential from being on the first floor?
No, absolutely not. No. I mean, the idea would be, we'd say,
I'm with you on that.
we'll have to be real careful how we craft that, but basically says, okay, residential on the second or third floors is, and it's kind of like an optional kind of a thing. So we'll basically make sure that we don't pigeonhole anybody into there.
Commissioner Vliet.
Yes. I know we have a couple people here who may have more expertise on this particular issue, which is why I think it is good to have people from different backgrounds on the commission. I think you guys bring a lot to the table in that respect. With regards to commercial real estate development, so I think this is going to be a really exciting corner. I think people are going to really, I think it's going to be a really, I wasn't necessarily for it to begin with, but I've come around and I think it's going to be an exciting opportunity. So we maybe don't need to get into these details because it's in the BMC, I guess, but as far as, I know there's frontage there's percentage we're talking about, or we're basically talking about maybe the whole first floor being commercial, but how many different retail, I guess, opportunities we want within, we don't necessarily maybe want one continuous, real estate, one business, I should say, or maybe want to get 2 or 3. And I know that was done over at Six Oaks, or it was done in a certain way to break that out. Can you kind of, I don't know if that's worth delving into that at this time. Maybe not, no.
Commissioner Stedman.
That's something that I think the market would determine. I mean, it could be that, there's a Petco that wants to go in there on the first floor or something, and that's a 11,000 square foot tenant, or it could be that you've got a couple of 1,500 or 2,500 square foot tenants. So my suggestion is we let the market determine it.
And if I can add to that, the market has been very successful in doing that on Bridgely Village. There's lots of small and some mediums, and so that's one of the dangers you get into when you start trying to control that stuff, because the market has a tendency to make these small shops. People are always looking for 1,500 to 2. Well, Commissioner Stedman knows that, looking for those really small places because I just have a little hair salon, versus some of the more intensive uses like a fly fishing shop might want 6,000 square feet, so you can have a fly fishing practice. So I mean, there's a lot of things like that sometimes it's more exciting to let the market figure that stuff out.
And then just goes without saying that we're going to go into this clustering discussion. And so what you're showing here is R9600 for DNR, for the coast, for Canyon Ridge. The clustering provision that we're discussing could play a role in those parcels, correct?
Well, yeah, and in fact, that'll be one of the things we will have the discussion with more in detail with the council, but we can have a little bit more here as well. And that is that, yeah, we want this potentially R96, well, I shouldn't say R9600 clustering, it should be clustering to
Right.
be allowed almost throughout the city.
Right.
That'll be something we'll have, well, we'll go into that.
Okay. Good discussion. I think we've given you the guidance that you were looking for.
Yes, indeed, thank you.
So let's go forward with your clustering memo and the clustering discussion that we're planning for next week. Is there any, and I appreciate the work you've done on that. I think you've really done a terrific job of kind of capturing kind of how we got here, what we're trying to achieve, a little bit of, the idea that we, even though parks are not specifically in our charter, we made that recommendation that the city and the Parks Board really look at both DNR and the MC Coast parcels for use as a park.
Yes.
Having said that, if for some reason that doesn't happen, what is the best use and the best designation for it, and could the clustering ordinance that we're looking at potentially play a role here? So I think you framed that up very, very well in the memo.
And I guess the only thing I was going to add to that is that if there's something in the memo, because I just passed out a new one, it's been a few little tweaks here and there. If there's something more that the commission is saying, we would like to have this spelled out a little bit more, I'd like to do that because I can do it first thing in the morning and have it to the council by.
Are there any, I read the last one carefully, so maybe on this one that you've handed to us, could you highlight for me or were they just minor little typo changes, or was there any content change in the one that we have in front of us that you'd want us to take a look at?
I added a little bit more depth to along the lines of what Commissioner Clark identified. Hey, let's kind of, and a couple places had potentially citywide and things like that.
Right.
They were really small changes that kind of happened throughout. Boy, I should have marked that.
That's okay. I didn't mean to kind of put you on the spot there, but I can tell you, I don't have really any changes from, but do you have one that you want to bring up?
Well, I just want to say that on page 7, where we talked about MC Coast as an R9600, I did a little bit more in the lines of the development of hillside areas, Bentley, Piper's Glen, Parkhurst, that would be substantially regraded. I went as far as I thought we should on that topic because Commissioner Clark is correct. I mean, we do have some really good examples of how these have developed that,
Right.
If we had our druthers, maybe we might want to see something different there. So I just want to make sure that point that out a little bit. I beefed that up a little. And, on the preceding page, I beefed up a little bit on the PUD limitations of 10 and 30%. That's on page number 6. Again, I think it was, oh shoot, I can't remember who did that comment. But basically they said, that's kind of a limiting clustering provision, so it's pretty narrow. So I did that. Those are the couple main changes I made there. On the page 10, again, Commissioner Clark's recommendation, underneath open space, one of the features of a clustering mechanism, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth bullet, added another bullet that basically talks about the feathered edge, because that was that's an important theme that runs throughout our
Right.
Imagine Bothell Comprehensive Plan.
does.
And that should be a big driver for what we do there. So
I agree.
that's one of the things
That
that I
was
think
good.
we should investigate when we get into this stuff. So that's about all I really wanted to identify. Oh, and sorry, I said one more. Commissioner Clark also identified maybe there's a way we can tie bonus densities to how much open space you provide. You provide more open space, maybe we have a little bit more incentive we provide you. So that was a good point as well. So threw those in there, and this is the memorandum that I think will be taken to the council if, unless anybody's got something they'd like to see changed.
Yeah, I think it's strong, and the PUD discussion is it's an obvious question. We've got a PUD ordinance. Why do we need a clustering one? So I think what we've addressed that well. Commissioner Cape.
2 quick points. We may not need to add it, but I'd like to discuss it in our meeting next week. I tried to find municipalities that have clustering ordinances right now, and I had a trouble tracking them down in Washington State. It'd be nice to get an abbreviated list of east side cities that, have the clustering
I
in
think it's an
place,
excellent point.
just so it doesn't look like a foreign concept.
Yep,
I mean,
yep, yep.
we don't need to follow everybody else, but at the same time,
Right.
it's prominent. The second item, I guess, tying on to Commissioner Clark's comment about the feathered edge, this is just a question more than a potential change, but the only concern that I have, I think clustering would be a good fit. The only concern I have is if you're looking at an R9600 neighborhood surrounding something that's going to be clustered and it'll be really tight designation, does the setback change? We kind of talked about with the 5400A, but does the setback change so that it doesn't look like a totally different development within a bigger lot area? That's maintaining the feathered edges, I think, is important. So when you look at the Canyon Ridge development, they did a great job of keeping a tree boundary all the way around, and I thought that was pulled off well. I just don't want to see the one portion of the site that's developable is right up against, someone's neighborhood. It might be a little bit caustic, so.
Yeah, and interesting you bring that up because our PUD has a provision that you expand the outside perimeter setback. Instead of a 15-foot, which is traditional in R9600, for example, you go to a 20-foot. And I think that's something that should be included with a clustering provision, as well as kind of encouraging, and again, you get into a little bit of danger here, trying to encourage where you want that forest retention, because let's say the great forest you want to save is over here, and but the houses are over here, and this is so we're going to have a discussion about that. And I think there's maybe a way we can kind of try and get the best of both worlds, but it may be the worst of all. So it's going to be a tough discussion point when we go through it.
Mr. Clark?
I think when we discussed the clustering idea back in the early 2000s, if I remember right, there was some discussion about increasing buffers and also I think possibly doing something with a landscape requirement or a buffer planting requirement that would also provide that. Because I agree, I think it's very important if you're in an existing zone, say R9600, and we're going to cluster, that you need to make sure that the neighborhood remains compatible with the pre-existing surroundings. I think personally, it's less important to have, what a person buys in that neighborhood, they know what they're buying. But I think if you're going to shove something into an existing area, you do need to take care to make sure that those people are not impacted, that are pre-existing owners, I guess is what I'm saying. So
Yes.
I think that's important. I think also your comment about looking for other clustering ordinances, they come by a lot of different names. Plan unit development is a form of clustering. Planned residential development is another. PRD is another way that they talk about those. So you may not see the word clustering, but if you look under those, I think. But I do agree it would be nice to have kind of a.
Yeah, and that's
I
one
think
of
it's
those
pretty
things.
much all of them, right? I mean, doesn't virtually every jurisdiction have some sort of clustering ordinance?
One of the things that's kind of hard to characterize if you're looking for one feature, as Commissioner Cabe has identified, is that it may be clustering but a different name. And like you identified, PRD is a very common terminology people use, but it really means a clustering subdivision. So that'll be one of the nuances I'm going to have to search through as I read through those regulations. The other thing is other jurisdictions have a real different approach to how they do their single-family residential neighborhoods. The city of Bothell, with its minimum lot size as large as it is kind of unusual. Most of them have an R4 designation, and they allow a lot size of 6,000 square feet. So there's an automatic clustering built in right there. So that's one of the things we're going to have to look at very carefully. But that's one of the research things I'll do if this is initiated.
Well, one thing I did find, it seems like it's a mechanism to meet an LID requirement, which is, I guess, another benefit that maybe we should touch on if we have it in here.
Oh yes, it is definitely a best management practice underneath the Ecology 2012 Surface Water Manual. In fact, that's one of the things we're talking about in our citywide adoption of the 2012 Ecology Manual, is how are we going to get clustering to occur and reduction of impervious surfaces. They kind of go hand in hand into this discussion with our zoning code, and there's a conflict there.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes, thanks, Bruce. Let's see. If I could there's one word I want to add. it's possible under summary on the first page of the memorandum, it says in addition to the public testimony. I don't know, I mean, this is maybe just, but I would like to make it in addition to the extensive public testimony. Because we have had, probably 20, 30 people speak on this, so I don't know if you guys are okay with that.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. And then on the second page, there's just a small typo at the very bottom. It says 9600 designation tends to fill up.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
And that's all my comments.
Yeah.
And this looks really good, though. Thanks for putting it together.
I realize, did we need to have a motion to continue our public hearing?
Because this is part of the discussion
Okay,
for this
all right.
area, so yeah, at the end of this, we'll.
When we're
continue
done
to
here, we will.
March
Okay.
2nd.
And that's what, did we know the date, March 2nd? Okay. Any other comments, feedback on on clustering? Yes?
I have
One more.
one
Okay,
quick-
Commissioner Clark.
Bruce, one of the things that, I'm wondering, would it be possible just as an exhibit for this thing next week to have, on either 11 by 17 or 8.5 by 11, have a couple of those other sites, available that, Bentley, Piper's Glen, what's the other one? Spirit Ridge, and I was also thinking the new Toll Brothers project
Parkhurst.
over here. Is that
It's called
Parkhurst?
Parkhurst now, yes.
Yeah, that one, because that
Yes,
was
yeah.
actually, that was used, believe it or not, back in the early 2000s, that was used as an example there were different examples of site plans on that site, if you clustered it and if you didn't. So it might be possible to revive some of that discussion as we go through this and
Yeah, I was starting to craft that presentation, and I was gonna throw it to the commission tonight, showing how far advanced I am and how efficient I am. I didn't even get a chance to get close to it. So I'm sorry I didn't do that, but I do believe there's quite a few of those things we can flash up onto the screen. And I will do a full PowerPoint presentation so they can, and we don't want to overdo it, of course, but I think it's appropriate to show that there's about 5 or 6 that we can show. The ones I gave you tonight, the reason I put those into the packet was because they examples of pretty good sized plats, medium sized plats, and small sized plats, and it's all kind of showing the same tendency. So that was why I picked the ones I did for the memo.
thank you.
Okay. Anything else that you would need from us?
That's all I need for tonight.
Okay, well then, I think
I-
we're ready to, go ahead,
So quick
Commissioner
question
Cecil.
about the meeting. So we've kind of talked about 3 and then 4 and then everybody. And then,
I'm sorry.
do you know
Oh.
what the council is actually planning on being able to host?
So we're as far as the meeting, if we can hold that, we're gonna have, when we get to reports from staff, we'll talk about the meeting.
Yeah.
So let's have a motion now to actually continue the public hearing on the 2015 docket of plan and code amendments to March 2nd. If someone could give us a motion and second that.
Motion to continue the 2015 docket plan and code amendments for the Nike Hill plan and code amendments to March 2nd.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, no study session tonight, no old business, so reports from staff. Let's discuss a little bit next week and our meeting on the 9th.
You bet. What we have done is we have established a way that more than 3 commissioners can attend. So the entire commission, if they so desire, can attend. I want to make sure that we know this is not a joint study session. This is basically a study session before the council with planning commission in attendance. And there's a little bit of a nuance there, but it's important because a joint study session means that we're going to spend a lot of time talking back and forth. And that's not the intention here because we've only got approximately 45 minutes to do this. My presentation will probably take about 15 minutes. And we want the commission to have a chance to, kind of identify some of the keys that they have identified. And then we want a lot of time with the council asking questions of staff and the commission as to what we would like to look at and why we would like to investigate this concept. So more than 3 can attend. We can have 4, 5, or 6. We only have 6 now. And what we're going to do is we're going to cover that. We've put that into our Imagine Bothell notice, so it's a noticed public meeting for the commission, as well as, of course, we're going to issue our 24-hour notice to the news media that there could be a quorum of the commission. So we're fine from that standpoint, so the more the merrier. Now, as far as the actual hearing, the study session itself goes, there was discussion about putting it into this little side room, and this is one of the things, but we're not sure how that's going to work because the council has found that when they switch from that room to the other, they get a little attrition and people go off to use the bathroom or they get a drink of water. So we may be doing it in this big room, but we'll have a discussion about that. I'll know for sure here in the next day probably or so what we're going to actually do there. And again, this is a fairly informal affair. The commission and the council are expected to have this exchange of ideas, and basically the idea is that so the council can understand what that is, with the concept that then the council says, okay, now we can make an educated, reasoned decision on whether to initiate this as a code amendment or not. So, you know, be prepared for good questions because the council has been asking some really good ones the last few weeks. So we're trying to get ready for that kind of thing. So that's it. It should be an interesting discussion. And hopefully the idea behind it is that the council will say, hey, you know what? This does have some merit. Go forth and conquer. And then we have our work cut out for us.
That's at 6 o'clock next Tuesday,
It's at
right?
6 o'clock next Tuesday.
Great, okay. Any other questions of staff? I think we're ready. Commissioner Cape. All right.
So I see a blank and the next day, so we would not have a planning commission meeting the following day?
Correct.
Okay.
We won't have, right now, we're not planning on another meeting until March 2nd, unless there's is there a need for one?
I see one on the 17th.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry,
we have the
I'm looking at
17th.
wrong one here. Sorry about that. I'm looking at an old calendar. Okay.
And that's going to come back to the South Riverside Plan and Code Amendments.
Got it.
One quick question, Bruce. Could we get a 3 or 4 month look ahead? Is that possible? I'd just like to know sort
Yeah.
of where we're going to wind up with
You know,
affordable housing and kind of close out some of these items.
We tried to do this, but right now we've got a whole bunch of balls in the air that have been kind of affecting our schedule. And I know it doesn't really, you don't see it, but you know, we're down a staff member and so there's some sort of covering for some other areas. So it's been kind of chaotic in our department. We have been trying to get multiple months to you. And we think it'd be a great idea so we can actually, okay, and this and put that stuff out. I'll talk to Gary Hassler, the planning manager, again about this. And, you know, we've had this discussion. We got to try and get multiple months to you guys. So we'll try to do that for the 17th and the 2nd.
Okay, thanks. It's not the end of the world, just
No,
kinda
but
curious
you're
what
right.
we're working
It would make a lot of sense to have that kind of a, you know, kind of future understanding.
Also, you have 2 study sessions on the 9th. There's one around the Fitzgerald.
Yes.
But there's no role for the planning commission in that part.
No, in fact, that one, I can explain what that one is. Basically, what the Fitzgerald area is, as we probably know, has kind of been kind of a controversial issue that's been going on for a while. And the council has said, you know, instead of doing the traditional plan and code amendment process that maybe has led to some dryness or maybe some cynicism on folks, we want to do something a little bit different. So we're looking for a different style of public participation, get both parties in the room, kind of have this, you know, instead of just, you know, making public testimony. So we're investigating that as an option as well.
Okay.
We're not sure if we're going to do a facilitated thing or a mediated thing. There's a whole bunch of options there, but we're going to have that discussion.
All right. Excellent. Reports from members. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.